How do you remember the morning of February 24th, 2022? How did it look from your perspective?
Well, it was a long night because on the evening of 23rd, I arrived from London to official visit to Warsaw, actually. And the night from 23rd to 24th of February was in one of facilities of Polish Defense Ministry. And of course, we were getting all the time news from home and other places that this night might be extremely troubling. One positive news was coming from Riga, from my own people, telling that birds have grounded, and that means that our Latvian assistance with stingers actually got in time to Ukraine. And we are, of course, in Latvia very proud about that we could deliver stingers in the right time because, as we were told later on, they have been used also to defend Kiev and Hostomel airport. So we have been lucky with that. I remember when people called me on 24th early morning around 4 o'clock and told that the war started, that the full-scale Russian invasion started in Ukraine. And that somehow reminded me of what my parents and grandparents were telling about 1939 and 1940. So I had this kind of a deeper empathy. I could feel that there is something similar happening. And actually, if you do analyze with today's perspective this Russian invasion in Ukraine, then you can see that this is the largest war in Europe since the Second World War. And in fact, it is in a certain way also a world war, because even if differently from World War I and World War II, they are not a group of nations fighting each other. There are still increased groupings around the aggressor and around the defender. So it is war which is now actually touching all the globe, because also voting in UN and crisis with grain and food. So it is serious enough.
The Baltic states, Poland, Czechia, Slovakia, they have been sending a lot of military aid. And even before the war started, the weeks and months leading up to the war. How important would you say that foreign military aid has been for Ukraine's war efforts?
It's very clear, if we do want this war to end, and who doesn't want the war to end, except maybe those who benefit out of that, is that we need to assist Ukrainians, because if Ukrainians will lose this war, then the Russian appetite will simply grow, and that will be eventual aggression also against other border countries, starting from Finland and ending also with Poland and other countries which are very close, because Belarus is not at this moment basically an independent country, at least in military terms. So I think it is practically important that we are assisting Ukraine, and it is also morally right, because if anybody in European Union claim that, for instance, Europe or European Union is constructed on values, then now it's time actually for them to show on what values and what way this union is constructed.
In Poland, the state launched a campaign through the Polish Electrical Association. They put up these billboards all over the country with Putin's face on it and the text, high energy prices are also his weapon. Which measures do you believe that states should take to make their populations more resilient towards Russian disinformation campaigns and this type of use of propaganda, and especially within the sphere of energy policy? Do you believe that this Polish billboard campaign was a good idea?
I think so, because, Baltic states have been for a longer time already litmus test for different types of Russian policies. And if you look to what Baltic states do have, we have 3 types of NATO excellence centers established in our countries. In Estonia, we have an excellence center for cybersecurity, because Estonia was the first one which experienced a cyber attack from Russian side. Lithuania have NATO Excellence Center for Energy Security, because they have been punished once they decided, to go more independent. And Latvia has the Excellence Center for Strategic Communication, Excellence Center of NATO for Strategic Communication in Riga, which actually were tackling these issues already a long time before the war was starting on February 2022. So from that perspective, I think that our societies are quite understanding how this propaganda is used, but still I think we need to join our forces to educate each other, to educate population, to see what is a fake news, how they use these fake news, because we are living in a very difficult times as far as media in general, because on the one hand, we have a lot of opportunities with social media. Everybody could be the author, everybody could produce something. But on the other hand, checks and balances in media, in journalistics, in social media are basically ceasing really to exist. They cannot balance such type of approach where media is controlled by the state totally and is used as a weapon. And this is what in all military strategies Russia already have been using and actually declaring openly. So it's known. So how in the free world, where you have simply all the possibilities to speak and also to lie, how can you defend the right information against such an authoritarian attack of media use? And I think that there is still a lot of job to be done, because in general, the modernity of 21st century is fragmentating any society. And what Russia is doing with their state propaganda, they are trying to accelerate this societal fragmentation and then use these different alienated groups in their own benefit and favor in order to make their opponents or imagined opponents simply weaker. So they don't need sometimes maybe to use a military force, because those societies already are in the trap and agreeing to what Russian media or what Russian politicians are telling.
Jimmy Carter's national security advisor, Zbigniew Brzezinski, famously wrote in his 1997 book, The Grand Chessboard, that without Ukraine, Russia ceases being a Eurasian empire. Would you agree with that assessment? And how important do you believe that Ukraine's victory in this war is for the regional security in Central Eastern Europe?
Well, first of all, we don't need empires around us on 21st century. And clearly that Russian political ambition while starting the war against Ukraine is to recreate at least some part of that imperial might in their own minds of their citizens, and also globally. So obviously, if they would win this war, which they should not, and take over the Ukraine, then the imperial ambition simply will be revived again, and they will simply continue to do their job of aggression. So at this stage, they are somewhere in the position of Ivan the Terrible or Peter the Great. So they are basically trying to recover those formerly conquered imperial territories, which is totally unsuitable for the current age of 21st century. It would be like France, Britain, or Germany trying to get back their lost colonies of previous century. So total nonsense.
Yes, and it's also worth for our friends in Western Europe to remember that Russian soldiers were once stationed in Paris in 1815. So they're if they get their speed up, they can actually go quite far sometimes. So maybe it's better to stop them early in their tracks and not let it go that far. Looking also at military cooperation here in the region of Central Eastern Europe, after his speech in Warsaw, President Biden attended this Bucharest 9 summit in Warsaw. And I may remind people that the Bucharest 9 was created by these 9 countries on NATO's eastern flank in 2015 in response to the annexation of Crimea in 2014. How do you believe that military cooperation is looking in this part of Europe? And what else can we do? Maybe joint procurement or more stationing of troops in each other's countries? Maybe increasing military mobility through joint infrastructure projects. What more can we do to make sure that we maximize our security in this part of Europe?
First of all, I would say that each and every country should boost their own military, their own defense forces, also their military industry. Very clear. Secondly, a part of 9 countries you mentioned, I have a great belief also in a further integration and cooperation among Baltic Sea countries, because after Finland and Sweden joins NATO, and basically de facto they joined, we in the Baltics, we received so-called strategic depth. And we can be much stronger region in general, and this region overlaps also with the perspective of giving a larger assistance to Ukraine. So my vision would be that Baltic Sea countries Poland with United Kingdom together and our transatlantic allies would be a much larger player in European continent as far as security, and not only security, but also politics. Because now people and countries are judged by their assistance or lack of assistance to Ukraine. And I believe that we also should work in future much more together with Ukrainians, because they would have a strong army, experienced army, and they will not hesitate also to help their friends, including us. And of course, there is also such initiative as JEF, Joint Expeditionary Force, led by United Kingdom. And I would say that this is also an important venue where countries, many countries from which you mentioned already, could cooperate and bolster our security.
You keep hearing that the leaders of the Baltic states, Poland, they call on Western leaders to increase their military aid to Ukraine. How much more do you believe that Ukraine would benefit if the 3-4 largest economies of the EU, Germany, France, Spain, Italy, if they would match Estonia's more than 1% of GDP that they send in military aid? If these 4 countries would match that, how much more do you think that that would benefit Ukraine?
The war would be over with Ukrainian victory and we would have peace. Very simple. So the Western economic package altogether is about 50% of the world. Russia is somewhere between 2 and 3%. So I'm claiming all the time, give those 50% of economy behind Ukraine, stop this war, win this war. But I am partly embarrassed by this kind of slow assistance. And it's not only because there is some economic discapacity or inability, because of course, many countries in the West have been basically giving up their military industries and taking away their own armies and weapons. But if there would be the right political message, stand behind Ukraine, get on your feet, it's just like at the beginning of the Second World War. This war would be over, so they have to do it. And it's enough to speak, it's enough to have nice words about values and etc. Just do it.
Speaking about military aid, which type of military aid do you believe is most necessary right now? Fighter jets, tanks, IFVs, or maybe just increased artillery shell production, which many experts are saying is at dangerously low levels. And despite the war having going on for 1 year, we still haven't taken a decision to increase that capacity by a lot.
The simple answer is everything. Everything is needed. Ukraine asks tanks, Ukraine asks artillery, Ukraine asks planes. Give it. Train them. Because actually what we see with our experience is that once we have been claiming to give this more assistance regarding tanks or some other weapons, first, a number of Western countries have been hesitant, but then 2-3 months later, they basically joined us and started to do this. And that will happen also now. But as far as the increase of shell production and munition production, this is highly important also for us to increase our own stocks. And I think that this message, what von der Leyen was recently telling, it was a very correct message that finally European Union is ready to sponsor also production of these shells of ammunition. But the important thing is that we start to produce this, but we also do not forget that this production line should be not only in so-called, as I say, Western countries, but they should be also in such countries as Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, because we don't want to be all the time sided. We also want to be part of this industry and part of recovery of military might and military industry.
The final question, Latvia hosted the 3Cs Initiative Summit last year, and some of the infrastructure projects have an impact also on national security through increased military mobility, through new roads, railways, airports. There is also the case of energy security thanks to LNG terminals or gas interconnectors. What role do you think that the 3Cs initiative could play for increased national security in the region?
First of all, it is a question of security because as we can see from Russian attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure plays enormous role. So, first of all, it can connect all 3 Baltic states and many different regions in Europe among each other. Secondly, it can make deliveries, necessary strategic deliveries from one allied country to another allied country much faster. And thirdly, of course, we have to work also for the future benefit of a European continent as such. So, namely, that is also the economic benefit of mutual cooperation. Infrastructure have been always the thing which was driving the development. If you look, back to Roman Empire, it was flourishing because it had the greatest and fastest roads, and the speed what was in Roman Empire was acquired only in Europe in 17th and 18th century, not before. So now it's a time to use this war with a positive thinking. Let's get away from all our dependencies and let's create a stronger Europe and stronger Baltic Sea region and stronger Baltic countries.
Fantastic, Mr. Pabriks. Thank you for taking your time.